How much does frame adjustability actually matter? This Rocky Mountain Altitude has 9 different suspension and geometry positions, so today we're gonna try each and every one of them to see just how different they make the bike feel. Good morning, everyone. I wanna give a big shout out to Jenson USA. They made this video possible. Thank you, Jenson. I've got a link to this Rocky Mountain Altitude in the description below, and anything you purchase from Jenson will directly help support my channel. Furthermore, I am supported by a brand called Ibis Cycles. I ride their bikes in half my videos, and I do 3 standalone Ibis videos a year. Beyond that, I have a few other industry affiliations. I am proudly supported by the guys at PNW Components, Industry 9, Shimano, Cali Protectives, and Kitspo Cycling Apparel. All right, let's jump into that video. More and more frames are coming with adjustable frame geometry, and a great example is this Rocky Mountain Altitude. There's 9 different mounting points for the rear shock. The way it works out, there's 3 different settings for the frame's geometry: steep, neutral, or slack. And within each one of those, there's 3 different suspension settings, either progressive, neutral, or a slight falling rate. I want to try each one of those configurations on a really fun section of trail. Today's test track has a pretty fast straightaway, a little drop off, a couple tighter turns, a couple little jumps, and a really technical steep goat climb. This section of trail is built and maintained by a local firefighter here named Trim. Trim, if you're watching, thank you. Trail is looking awesome. Also, quick shout out to the WMDC, our local advocacy coalition. I'm pretty curious, how many of you have frames with suspension or geometry adjustability? Drop me a comment below. Let me know your experience with it. Have you actually used it and adjusted it, or have you left it in the stock setting this entire time? So why don't we offer more adjustable geometry? Well, there's a bunch of downsides to it as well. How many of us are guilty of getting something and not setting it up correctly and then having a subpar experience? For example, how many folks get GoPros, don't set them up correctly, and then throw it in the gadget graveyard? I've been guilty of that more times than not. The last thing a bike brand wants to do is put all this effort into building a bike and then even more effort in adding adjustability, and then have consumers try it, have it set up incorrectly, and then have a subpar experience with that product. That doesn't help anyone. Today, I'm curious to see how much of a difference this really makes, and should this be a deciding factor when you're shopping for a new bike. Before we start monkeying with stuff, I want to do a control test run with the bike the way I've been riding it since I received it almost 2 months ago. And I've been riding it in the neutral setting most of this time. I really like it. Let's do one fun run like this, and then we'll start tweaking. Slidey. I should have brought my trail saw today. Oh, that's fun. All right. This might be the most technical part up here. That's the neutral setting, neutral geometry, neutral suspension. That's how I've ridden for the last couple months. I really like that setup. That was fun. This is when I try really hard. Let's grab our cheater wrenches and just crank down on this thing. Nah, that's not super tight. Cool. That's the neutral geometry, slightly digressive suspension. It should bottom out more easily and have more traction on the climb. Oh, that's all right. I would not call that a drastic difference. That is a little softer, but not bad. I thought it would be more noticeable than that. I would say it's less noticeable than an air volume reducer, but I'd rather mess with that trail side than the air volume reducer. Oh, it's technical enough, it's hard to actually make. There is a tiny bit more traction, but it's not a huge difference, really. It could also be sagging in a lot more and then putting more weight on the rear wheel. That was amazing climbing, huh?
Yeah. Edge of my seat.
Edge of your metaphorical seat. It felt like there was maybe a 5% more rear wheel traction, but it wasn't a drastic difference. It was pretty subtle. It felt like half of a volume reducer in terms of how the progressivity changed. I could definitely understand how a lighter rider would really benefit from that. I wonder where that bolt fell to. There's so many Caterpillars out right now. So now it is in neutral geometry, slightly more progressive suspension. Should be better for the heavier, more aggressive, faster camp. Let's see if that's true. Have fun. Tear them up. Oh, wow. That one's a bit more noticeable. Nice. That feels good. Definitely more poppy. Wow, that's cool. I was not expecting that to be that noticeable. That was like 10% more progressive than neutral. Like probably 15 over the regressive. There we go. We're 33% done. All right. Ah, that was a pilot error, not a bike error. I really liked the last run. That felt the best of everything so far today, whopping 3 runs in. I didn't notice any lack of traction, but I did notice that when I pushed in and pumped the bike, there was a lot more support and I would rock it forwards and it was easier to get airborne. Now we're trying steeper geometry and the same progressive suspension curve as what we just did. I think this will be a more noticeable change. I think the geometry is more noticeable than the suspension. Whoa. Wow. Oh, that's a noticeable difference. Whoa. Oh. It's definitely harder to get the front wheel up in the air. And the bike is more, a bit more twitchy. It's lighter steering. I wouldn't say it's like sketchy twitchy, but wow, definitely sitting tall. There's a big owl. You guys see that owl? What's up, bud? Hope you found some good breakfast. That's a beautiful bird. Hey, that was a little bit easier. That was super interesting. The owl might have been more interesting than the bike though. Gonna go to the steep geometry neutral suspension. You good? It does feel better than the last run. How much better? I was still, a little out of control. The steering is lighter. It takes a moment or two to really get a feel for what's going on. That was cool, but definitely had me a little bit more reserved than the neutral geometry setting. The body positioning is nice for the climb, but it feels like the fit changes ever so slightly. I just made the hard part. I think there might be ever so slightly more traction than last time. That was fun. Good, have fun. Steepest and most regressive suspension. Gripping footage, huh? Guy rides bike. Guy futzes with shock hardware. Post video. Like, share, subscribe. Chip in there. Okay guys, here we go. Steepest geometry and most regressive suspension. Easiest to bottom. Whoa. All right. That actually feels good when landing. I like that more than I thought. The steering was light and the bike wanted to be less leaned in the corners. The whopping 2 corners. The overall feel improved. I think by making the suspension a little bit more regressive, it ended up meaning that I was deeper into the stroke on the bigger hits, and that in turn slackened out the geometry. Clawing up the rocks and roots. Yes, I feel like a rock crawler. My Jeep might not go rock crawling, but my bike does. It's not every day you find yourself on the side of the trail 9 times in a row, possibly 10 times in a row, changing your bike's frame, kinematics, geometry, all that. Just another day in the neighborhood here though. I'm kind of surprised, but steep geometry with the more regressive suspension actually felt noticeably better than the steep geometry in either the neutral or the more progressive. And I think that's because the bike ended up deeper in the travel more often, and that kind of counteracted the steeper head angle. Now we're gonna try going to the slackest geometry, but the most regressive suspension. This is gonna result in a really low bottom bracket and super easy to bottom out, because as you get slacker, it puts more weight on the rear end of the bike too. Whoa, that is, wow. That's a bit harder to control. All my weight's on the back of the bike. Whoa. Feels like more of a sled. Whoa. I do not like that as much as the steep but regressive setting. Yeah, that was too much rearwards bias. For a steeper track, I could see that being pretty cool, but that combined with that suspension, not my favorite. As we start climbing here, bike feels okay. It's not as comfortable as the steeper geometry was. I need to work a bit more to keep it going in a straight-ish line. There we go. That was definitely the hardest to control. The steeper head angle was easier to ride with than the slacker. The way the suspension was set up, regressive, the bike ended up pretty low and slack, and it wasn't as fun as the other setups. I could see a use case for it though. All right, now we're gonna do really slack, neutral suspension. I wonder if I'm the only person in history to ever try all 9 settings on this bike. Oh, a little bit of oversteer. Oh. Oh, that corner is harder to make. Yeah, this is slacker than I'm really looking for. So the corners were more of a challenge. The straightaway is fine. I wouldn't say the straightaway was much better or anything, but the corners were tricky. It was easier to do the enduro bro drift, but that's not really my riding style because it's not fast. It's just showy. I like the controlled arcs. I botched it. Try again. I feel like it's just focus, not so much bike setup though. Should have enough practice by now to know how to get up it. It was a bit of a struggle. Final setting, the way it came to me, which is in the slackest geometry, most progressive suspension, the Whistler Bike Park Special. This is a great place to ride. This is not Whistler Bike Park. Similar, but not quite. Good. Oh, almost lost the back end right there. I do like that progressiveness, but I don't think I need that slow. Whoa. Hard to, almost lost it in that corner. So it's harder to hold a line with it that slack through the turns. I do like that progressivity. This has been awesome. In the next run, I'm gonna set it up in neutral geometry and progressive suspension. Bike Park Special versus the Tech Climb. Oh, that does not get easier after 9 laps. Oh. It's a busy day. Yeah, I'm gonna put it back in my favorite setting. It was the second one we tried. Sweet spot, neutral geometry, most progressive suspension. So frame, geometry, and suspension adjustability, does it matter? Depends. I have a different set of demands than someone riding, say, in Santos or Alafaya in Florida. Those trails are fun, but they're completely different than this stuff. So I think there is a good case for adjustable geometry, but would I buy a bike simply because it has adjustable frame geometry? No. there's way more to the puzzle than just that one aspect. Well, I guess it's 9 aspects here. I am glad we took the time today to try out all these different configurations. I found a new sweet spot. I'm gonna run this in the neutral geometry, but in the more progressive suspension orientation. I am enjoying this bike here. I have a link to it over at Jenson USA. I didn't wanna make this video all about talking about this bike. It's more about trying different suspension adjustments. I learned something today. It was cool isolating each adjustment one at a time. If you guys like this video, that little red subscribe button below me, click that. I pop videos out about once a week or so. Leave me a note in the comments below. Does your current bike have adjustable geometry or suspension, and have you fiddled with it? I'm curious because your feedback is what makes all these videos that much more interesting. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Thank you. Nice.